All right. Good afternoon, teachers, and thank you for joining us today for our grades 4 to 6 teacher webinar, where we seek to focus on math in action, implementing contextualized learning opportunities in the mathematics classroom. I'm your presenter today, Lamar Edgehill, Regional Math Coordinator in the Ministry of Education and Youth, Region 5. And I am truly looking forward to quite an engaging session with you today. So again, I'm happy that you're here. Now, as we seek to go through today's session, it is always important for us to start off right. So I want you to just bow your heart with me as I open with a brief prayer. Most gracious eternal God, we want to thank you, Lord, for this a new day, a new opportunity where we can gather like this in the virtual setting to have such a session. I pray, no, Lord, that you'll just be with us, guide us as we engage in the concepts that we want to explore today. Open our minds that we will walk away learning new things, and that at the end of it, Lord, your students will benefit as well. We look to you now and evermore. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So good afternoon, teachers. Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to our virtual session. It's been a while. I'm happy that we can gather like this both on Zoom as well as those joining us on YouTube. Now, just to kind of get things going, we want to have some housekeeping matters addressed quite quickly. The first thing I want to talk about is the fact that the microphones have been disabled for now. So what will happen is we want to utilize a chat feature. So there's a chat icon somewhere there. You can just go ahead and utilize it even right now by putting your name and the school you're representing in the chat, just to kind of flex those fingers while we seek to engage in this session. At the same time, too, I must say that when it's time for us to share and to speak, that can be facilitated, but we want to use the icons that we see on screen. We want to use the raise hand feature. So when it's time for us to speak to each other, I want you to just raise your hand, and then once I acknowledge you, there and then you will be permitted to open your microphone and we can speak to each other. So those are the two main things I want to share with you today. I know that you're all in your own individual spaces, but I ask that as we're here now, we just try our best to focus on the session. I promise not to be long. I have learned that in the virtual setting, you really want to spend too much time, but you want to ensure that whatever you do, it is concise enough within the time span given. So I promise not to be long, but we want to ensure that we touch on quite a few things that when you leave here, you can walk away thinking about how you can further influence your delivery to your students along the line of conceptualization. That said, I want to get your attention. So just to have you participating with me at this point in time, I am going to ask that you take part in this little icebreaker activity. And this activity is centered around what we will be doing today. Now, there are 3 words that I want us to think about today. And what I will do for you, I'm going to give you a statement that reflects what the word is all about. And I'll also let you know how many letters are within the word. And your job is to figure out what that word is based on the statement and the number of letters provided. At the same time, too, I may, just to ease you into the process, give you the vowel and the vowel placement, and even the first letter of the word. So let us see if we can get things going. So the first word that we want to pull on, it speaks to a general word that refers to the specific topic in mathematics. And this word, it carries 7 letters. So colleagues, I would love for you to make an attempt. Think about it. It's very close to what we will be focusing on today. It's 7 letters, and it speaks to the math topic that you're doing. So whatever math topic you're doing, there's a general word that we can use to represent math topics. And I'm going to look to see if there are any attempts. I'm liking what I'm seeing so far, but I'm going to say, no, that's not the word so far. So let me give you the vowel placement. These are the two vowels that are within this word. So I'm going to ask you to use this little hint to see if you can figure out which word am I talking about at this point in time. I see a response that says concept. All right, so we're hitting close, very close. It does start with C, but it's not concept, right? So this one isn't concept. So I'm gonna give a little more time for others to pull on the task and see if anyone figures it out. And I'm gonna go ahead and give you the completed word. And right there, the word is content. So when we talk about the math topics, we talk about things like addition, subtraction. That's the content that we want to explore. So that's one word that we need to hold on to today as we engage in this session. There's another word that I want to pull on, and I believe that we're going to get this one really quickly. So the principle behind the mathematics content. So the principle behind the mathematics content. And just like the previous word, this word carries 7 letters. All right. So the principle behind the mathematics content, and I do want to implore your colleagues to make an attempt, put your thoughts in the chat, and let's see if we can stay here together and engage wonderfully in the time that we have to share. All right. I'm going to go ahead and give you the vowels for the word. All right. So think about it. The first word was content. But this time we want to look at the principle behind the mathematics content. Right or wrong, just put your thoughts in the chat. Don't be shy. Please do share with me. I do crave your participation today as we engage in this session. I'm going to go ahead now and give you the first letter of the word. And we are coming close, but look carefully at the vowel placement, and you're gonna find that it's very consistent across. But yes, this time around the word is going to be concept, right? So concept is indeed the word. All right, I almost feel like doing the last one is going to be a giveaway, but let's do it nonetheless. So the final word that we want to utilize today, it speaks to the setting or circumstance surrounding the mathematics content, right? So this time we're talking about the setting surrounding the mathematics content. And just like the other two, we're still carrying 7 letters, right? Still carrying 7 letters. Here we have our vowel placement once more, and we're going to start off with the letter C. And this is the final word that we will be looking at today. The first word we looked at was content. The second word was concept, and right on the nose, Mrs. Blackwood, we have the final word being context. And these 3 words are going to be quite vital for what we will be talking about today as we seek to engage in this session. Now, just to give you a breakdown as to what we're trying to cover. So we want to really start off by looking at why do we need to teach mathematics in a context, right? Why is that important? And then after we explore that, we want to spend a little time to look at some of the emerging practices surrounding teaching mathematics from a particular perspective, more so a contextualized one. We're going to spend a little time as well looking at a sample plan, just trying to break down how the plan contextualizes the math concept being delivered. And we're going to close out by looking at just some general approaches and things that we need to bear in mind once we are going to contextualize a math lesson. So these are essentially the 4 main parts of today's session. And that's why I say to you, we're not going to spend a lot of time. We're going to ensure that once we leave here in the short space of time, we leave here at least with an appetite to revisit how we have been teaching, if it is that we have not been infusing some of these ideas already. I'm also going to be quite open to what you have to share, because I believe that as educators, we are a community. And as a community, we have best practices, pockets of best practices everywhere. And this is an opportunity for us to showcase our knowledge and to share with others and to see how what we are doing in our little space can be impactful in another. So let's get right into it. So getting started. Now, for us, we have to think about why do we educate our students? And I mean, a simple Google search, the first thing that comes up when I ask the question, what is the purpose of education? It aligns with what I have held dear to my heart for a very long time. And the fact is, we educate students because we want to prepare them to function. We want to prepare them to become functional members of society. So we ensure that we engage them in such a way that they acquire the necessary knowledge and skills to be able to function in the world. But at the same time too, it was quite intriguing that I had to ask a follow-up question. What are the needed and what skills are needed to make someone a successful member of society? And this list came up, and it's quite intriguing how there are some elements of this list that aligns carefully with something that we are quite accustomed to. It talks about communication, having communication skills, being able to problem solve, being able to work as a team, so you're going to collaborate, and then being able also to think analytically and quantitatively. And this caused me to reflect carefully on what we are now doing in education. So in Jamaica right now, if we were to look at ourselves against the background as to what it is that is being said now, right, you're going to find that our curriculum has indeed shifted. And to accompany our shifting curriculum, or a shift in the curriculum, we have also a shift in our assessment practices. So within our curriculum, we now realize that the NSC is pushing towards more student-centered learning opportunities. We're looking at project-based learning. There is a 5E lesson plan design that is implemented. And there's also the push towards the 4 C's, the whole idea of collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. But then to accompany this shift in our curriculum, we have a shift in our assessments. No longer are we focusing on rote memorization of content or concepts, but we're now going into a space where we are requiring students to apply themselves, especially in the area of the performance tasks. And because of this, the shift away from trying to remember a lot of content, there's a breakdown in the assessment where we're now focusing on application of content at the grade level. So we have assessment at grade 4, grade 5, and 6. And what is assessed at grade 4 is just the content of grade 4 and looking at how the student can apply themselves around that exposure. So I want to pick on the performance task more than any other assessment so far. And if I pull your attention to the performance task, one of the things that are a set of things that we have to talk about is the fact that the assessment requires that the students apply knowledge. At the same time too, this knowledge that they're to apply is juxtaposed into a background or a context. And then in achieving this application, the students are required to pull on their transferable skills to be able now to take what they learned in one lesson or one principle or within a discipline and utilize it and transfer that knowledge and skill into a novel and unique case. So if I were to highlight anything from what is on the screen, I have to highlight these 2 sections. One, the idea that we want to apply knowledge and the fact that that knowledge must be applied within a context. This brings about a very interesting thought. If it is then that students are required not just to remember content or to learn concepts, but now they're also required to take that content and the concepts taught and apply it to a context, then doesn't that have some bearing on how we teach the content to the students? Now, to kind of encapsulate this, I want to invite you to take on a little activity with me to see where we are with how we think about what we do. Let us say that you have 10 coins, and the 10 coins represent your effort in teaching or your emphasis in teaching, right? And we have 3 plates here: content procedure, content concept, and context. And you have 10 coins to share, and the 10 coins represent the range or extent of your effort. I would like for you to put in the chat how many coins would you give to each plate listed displayed on the screen. And to kind of help you with it, you can just put the 3 numbers in order, and I'll know that this means the first number means content procedure, your second number would mean content concept, and your third number would mean context. All right, so think about it real quickly and think about how, when you're going to teach a lesson, if you were to divide your effort or emphasis and you only had 10, it's quantifiable and it's 10 of it, and you were to share it across the 3, how would you share yours? I'm really interested in really seeing what you have to share. I'm quite open to the variety that will come, but I want to encourage you to just put in the chat, how would you allocate, how would you go about allocating the 10 coins across the 3 areas? And again, each coin represents a portion of your effort. So I wait a minute just to get some responses in. I mean, I really would want to have a conversation with members here as we seek to engage in this session today. So, colleagues, I call on you at this time just to put your numbers in the chat. I mean, just a quick thought, how you feel about the number allocation, and just throw those numbers in the chat so that we can talk about it in a moment, right? But put some thought into it. And while I await 2 or 3 responses in the chat, I'm just going to say a few more things, and then afterwards we'll continue with the session. But I do anticipate that we have teachers who will be willing to just place their numbers in the chat, just to allow for some contextual dialogue around what you currently hold to, and where we may necessarily want to go at this point in time. But when we look at a lesson, we talk about content procedure, and at the end of the day, this is where you want your students to be able to carry out the operations as needed or as required. So knowing when to multiply, knowing how to add, how to carry out the division process, how to carry out the calculation when looking at ratio, all these things you want to see coming out in the content procedure. But then in the content concept, we're talking about the why behind what you do. So when it comes on to teaching, you may know how to convert from improper fraction to a mixed number, but maybe there's someone who, despite knowing how to carry out the conversion, which is the procedure, the individual might not know why they do what they do, or may not even know the true relationship between a mixed number and an improper fraction, right? At the same time too, when we talk about context, this is where your student needs to be able to look at a scenario, a case, a situation, a real life context, and from that be able to identify what mathematical knowledge or skill could be applied to the situation in order to resolve what is in front of them. So that's really the thinking, and I was hoping that by now I would have gotten a few responses in the chat. But notwithstanding, I trust that we are here and we are participating as best as we can. Now, from my perspective, if you asked me to share the 10 items across the 3, this is how I would have done it, right? So I would have given 2 of my efforts out of the 10 to content procedure. I'd have given probably 5 to content concept and 3 to the context. And why I would give it in such a way is that I know at the end of the day, you really want to know that there is truly a conceptual understanding of what is being done. And then afterwards, with a rich conceptual understanding, there is going to come the need to be able to apply that conceptual understanding to a context. And then for the purpose of efficiency, you would want then to have the procedure in place, which is all fine. Now, because of this breakdown, you're going to want to ensure that your students are able to take the content and the concept they have been taught and apply it to a context. Now, the question I may want to ask you at this point in time would be, can someone learn the content and the concept without being exposed to a context and still be able to apply the content to the concept, to the context? Now, before we even attempt to respond to this question, I'm going to show you 3 questions on screen. And what I want from you, you can even go ahead and put the answer to the question in the chat. But even beyond the answer itself, we want to look at what mathematical knowledge is being pulled on to respond to the case. All right, so teachers, what mathematical knowledge is being pulled on to respond to the question? And again, you can please feel free to even answer the question in the chat. But the question says here, a set of books were shared equally among 3 children. If each child received 6 books, how many books were shared? So here it is, we have a question such as this. And again, I do encourage you to put your responses to the question in the chat. And already I am seeing a response coming my way. So right away, I'm seeing 18, that 18 books were shared, right? Now, if we think about it, what knowledge or what approach would have been used to derive this response of 18? Like, yes, I see 3 and I see 6. These are 2 numbers within the question, right? But despite seeing these 2 numbers within the question, what is going on in this situation that's going to allow me to know that I should carry out a particular operation in order to get to my 18? I mean, again, I have some things on the screen here, A, B, C. You can select one or more if you see fitting, just to say which one of these would align to the task. Is it A? Is it B? Is it C? Is it A and B? Is it A and C? Is it B and C? Just go ahead and place in the chat which concept or which mathematical content you see being aligned to the task. And if you look at the task carefully, you'll realize that it requires comprehension on the part of the learner. So we're saying that there are 3 children and each child has the same number of books. So if one has 6, it means that each of them would have 6 books as well, because it did say that each received the same. Now, we could look at it from 2 perspectives. There's a child who may say, I could just go ahead and multiply. I could just go ahead and multiply the 6 by 3 to say 6 groups of 3, right? At the same time, too, another child may say, I could just go ahead and add 6 to itself 3 times. And in doing so, I'd have gotten to my answer. And I must say to you that there's a pool of students who, if you ask them to multiply 3 and 6 or to add 6 3 times, they could do it. But from that same pool of students, you're going to find that there is even a smaller pool or a subset of that group who, if given this task, they can take it on and the others may not. Let's try another one. So here we have another question on screen. It says that Marlon wants to tile his bedroom floor using square tiles of size length 2 feet. How many tiles are required if his rectangular room is 24 feet by 30 feet? And that's the dimension of the room. So this time around, and please feel free to just place your response to your answer to the question in the chat. But this one again still requires a child to think and to think critically about what is being asked of him or her. Because here it is, there is a room that needs to be tiled. And right here, there's a linkage to the area concept because you're covering a surface. And once you're covering surfaces, you're talking about area. But then the mere fact that the word rectangle is in it, or the word rectangular is there, it now leads you towards a particular calculation around how you would measure that area. So that becomes significant in that you would end up looking at 24 rows of 30 or 30 columns of 24, which you can easily take on by multiplication because of the array that exists as a result of the rectangle. But then it is to figure out how many of these square tiles can I fit in this given area. So it therefore becomes important to find the area of one tile. And once you find the area of one tile and you find the area of the room, you can then carry out a mathematical operation that will get you to figure out how many of these tiles can I fit into this given space. And so I bring up my little table again. So based on what this question requires of the learner, which set of content areas would I pull on outside of the area concept? What else do I need? And I'm liking the response I see in the chat, where the 2 by 2 gives you the area of the tile, which is 4 square feet. And then you divide the area of the room by the area of the tile to tell you how many tiles you would need to complete the space. And again, that's really good. That's really good. So right there, I'm seeing a few things happening. I'm seeing multiplication coming out in that you don't have to, but it is good, or multiplication would allow you to get the area of the room as well as the area of the tile. But then division comes into play again when it is time now to get how many tiles you would need to cover the given space. Again, if you ask students to multiply and then to divide, they probably would do that for you because they may know how to. But the challenging part of it for many students would be knowing, based on the context given, what they need to pull on to respond to the question. And I can say to you now, and maybe you can agree or disagree with me on the matter, but many times, especially in these contextual tasks, it is not that the child doesn't know how to do the math. They just don't know which concepts to pull on to apply to the math. And that's really where it is. I'm going to give you one more, and I'm just doing this to kind of expose you to the reality behind how there is a disparity between knowing the content and being able to apply the content, because you're looking at the context and how to pick up within the context which concepts to apply. So here's the final one. So the final one says here that Keisha received half of a chocolate bar, then gave her friend a quarter of her share. What fraction of the entire bar did her friend receive? And I want us to think about this one. And I did this one last deliberately because it boils down to a mathematical concept that we do quite regularly, especially at grade 5 and 6. But the question itself may baffle a child. It may. And I hope that we can respond to the question while we're here. But we are seeing here that Keisha has a half, and we want to now find a quarter of Keisha's half. So there's a chocolate bar at Keisha, so it's half. So you want to find a quarter of a half. And I'm sure the moment I start to say quarter of a half, there is a particular operation that comes to your mind immediately when we start to talk this way. Right? So right away, if you think about it, you may find yourself actually multiplying. If you multiply a half by a quarter, just simply multiplying those two quantities gives you the answer to the question. But how many of your students would, seeing this question, readily get up and then go right ahead and know that they should multiply? So the bottom line here in what I'm expressing to you is there is, yes, the importance in the concept to be taught, but what may befall our students is when it gets to the application component, that is where they may seem to fall off in the delivery or in their ability to handle the task. So the takeaway point at this juncture in the session would be that, yes, it is indeed important, critical, fundamental that students learn the concepts. But beyond learning the concept, where we need to take it to the next level is that we want our students to be able to now apply the concept. And application comes through exposure. You have to expose the child in order for them to develop a mental rigor around being able to apply themselves. And that's what we want to get at today. Now, a big opportunity for us to carry out this application comes in our lesson plan progression. Now, the 5E is the 5E deliberately for what it has to offer and what it speaks to. Now, if we look carefully, and you can again agree or disagree with me on the matter, many times what happens is a child may learn the concept, and maybe spent a week, maybe even 4 days learning the concept, and then on the last day, there's a little exposure to an application of the concept, or maybe not at all, but maybe further down the line when they would have probably learned the content already and it may be slowly fading from their minds because of the flow of content being taught as they progress through the term. But the 5E itself has a wonderful progression that provides an opportunity to contextualize lesson. If not throughout it all, there is a set location where it can be done. So you would have your engagement where you, under mathematics, you're seeking to pique your child's interest while at the same time ascertaining their prior knowledge, because the prior knowledge becomes a springboard for exploration. Having looked at the engagement, it is time for students to explore where on their own, under the guidance of the teacher, they are now going to investigate and draw conclusions. The conclusions that they draw may be right or wrong. They need an opportunity to share and to discuss and to deliberate on their conclusions. So we go through the explain. And having gone through the explain, this is where we confirm whether or not there is understanding. And right after that, they are now tasked to go utilize this new knowledge. And after they utilize new knowledge, they have to be evaluated against the original objective. With this 5-part breakdown, colleagues, I want you to put in the chat for me, where along this spectrum, if there's only one place, and please, there's more than one places, but if there's only one place in the lesson you had an opportunity to have students going through a contextualized opportunity within the lesson, which stage would it be? Let me hear you out in the chat. Would it be in the engage, the explore, the explain, the elaborate, or the evaluate? If you had to pick one location where it provided the greatest opportunity for application, which E in this 5-stage process would be the most ideal place to have that concept being addressed in terms of contextualization of the lesson? Now, while you think about it, and again, I did say to you, I'm not going to keep it here too long. If you thought of the elaborate component, then you are indeed correct. The elaborate, that E, provides you with the greatest opportunity to have an alignment to a contextualized task. Now, this doesn't mean that there's nowhere else this can be done. But what I'm saying is this is where the greatest opportunity exists. There are other places where you can align it to a context in the engagement, throughout the exploration, as well as in the evaluation. But the greatest opportunity, the greatest of them all, comes in the elaborate stage. And that is where I want to pull our attention today. Now, to show you this, I'm going to show you a sample lesson, and we're going to pick it apart together, just to kind of go through what each E has to offer, and to show, just to kind of get to the point where we capitalize on the opportunity throughout the elaboration to have the students engage conceptually and contextually. So here we go. Let's take it as a sample. And just to find a middle ground for us, grade 5 is the middle ground. We have grade 4, 5, 6. So grade 5 is the initial middle ground. We will have other exposures to other objectives in other grade levels, but let's start here. So let us say in the curriculum, number term 3, unit 1, there's an objective that says should be determine the operations to be used to solve worded problems when no numbers are given. And the prior knowledge that is linked to it is that we want to be able to differentiate between the use of addition and multiplication, subtraction, and division in problem situations involving 4 numbers. And these are just taken directly from the curriculum, where your focus is, if there are no numbers given, can I determine the operation that I need to use? So that's the focus. Again, if there are no numbers given, can the student determine the operation that should be used to work through the question? So the engage stage, like I mentioned earlier, speaks to piquing students' interest and getting them interested in the lesson. That is where we want to start things off, right? So if we look here at this breakdown, and I want you to look at it for yourself as well. So there is a miniature discussion that's being had with the students around the idea of what it means to solve worded problems, right? But then the students are presented with worded problems to solve in a small group. But this worded problem that they're getting, it includes numbers. So, for example, one of the things that we did earlier when we just started off, we had some worded questions with numbers in it. So even though the aim of the lesson is for students to be able to, when given a worded problem with no numbers in it, they should know what operation they would use. In the engagement, the initial activity is giving them a worded problem with a number or with numbers to use. The question you should ask yourself now is, why here am I looking at worded problems with numbers? Because we must go back to the intention of the engagement, piquing interest and assessing students' prior knowledge. The prior knowledge to this task would be if they can already evaluate questions where numbers are given. So you want to see where they are against that. And also, students are placed in groups really early to work together. Now, after they have taken this on, the group is given some time to solve the problem, as well as now to share their solution and explain just why it is that they use the operation that they did. And afterwards, there's a little discussion being had on what they did. And then from there, the students are sent off to take on the explore stage. This is the bulk of the lesson. And in this part of the lesson, this is where students are working together, trying to come up with solutions while the teacher plays the role of a facilitator. So the students are still placed into groups, right? But this time, while they're being placed into groups, they're given cards with worded problems, and these problems don't have any numbers in them. So these are questions where there are no numbers, just a scenario without numbers. And I'll show you a sample of what I'm talking about very soon. Now, the students are instructed in their groups to determine the operation that they need to use to solve the problem. Bearing in mind, there are no numbers in the problem, but they have to determine the operation. This is where the prompt comes in from the teacher, where we're going to now encourage them to look back at their experience from the engagement to see if there's anything that they did and picked up on that would allow them to pick up on when they would use a particular operation. And once that is being done, the teacher will just move around, ask certain questions, just watch the groups and ensure that they stay on task. Now, once the students are through working through the task, they need an opportunity to share what they have done. So in the explain stage, the students are now given the opportunity to share, and not just sharing with the teacher, but share with the wider class. So the class is brought back together for a whole group discussion, and we're now asking the students to share their word of the problem, right? And to also give the operation that they use to solve it. When they share their operation, they're supposed to also go a stage further to now have a discussion around the different problems. So one person may say addition, but then someone else may come and say multiplication, and they have to justify why not. And this is where you clear up all misunderstanding. So if they're not clear, this is where the discussion is hard, and we push through until they have a common understanding. Once it is that the class now has a common understanding as to what is being achieved, this is where we go to the elaborate stage. Now, this is where I want to talk to you some more. Now, we are now asking the students to go back to their groups, but this time, and I want you to know the openness of the task. This is where we want to be as open as possible. This is where we're seeing that we're asking the groups to create their own word of the problems, right, without numbers, right? And when they create their own numbers, they're supposed to go to another group and exchange tasks. So they're exchanging their word of the problems. And then when they exchange the word of the problems, they're going to now go back to their group and now try to work out their neighboring group's problem, trying to figure out which operation would I use based on the question. Now, this becomes so rich in that it does two things. One, the ability to write is one level of understanding by itself, where because they know what they understand the operation that they're focusing on, they can write questions, unique questions that would match it without numbers. And then having somebody else interpret their intention becomes very powerful, because you're promoting the communication, you're promoting the creativity in building the question, the collaboration in the exchange and the group working together, and then the critical thinking in trying to both write the question and decipher someone else's work, right? But then when you're through, you want them to explain, you want them to share out what is happening, explain their thinking behind what they wrote, as well as what they interpreted from what someone else wrote. And again, the teacher will circulate the room, trying to maneuver, managing the conversation, and allowing the students to flow. Now, with this being done, the elaborate was the most open aspect of the entire lesson, where you got them to apply themselves in an open manner. And when I say open manner, it means that they're not boxed into a single solution, they're not boxed into a single approach, but they're now utilizing the flexibility of mind to take on the task. When this is done, we dial it down a bit, and this is where we want to evaluate students individually. All along, we've been doing group setting activities, but we want to now move away from the group and now get to an individual basis. So when we say individual basis, we want each child to take on the task for themselves. So here's an example. Provide a set of word problems without numbers and ask students to identify the operation needed to solve them, but do it individually. Don't let them work in groups anymore. We want to see if each person can stand by themselves and work. So here are two examples. The class has a box of pencils. They want to distribute them evenly among the students. How many pencils will each student get? And right there, you can pretty much pick up on which operation they'd have to use in order to work through the question. And you can think about the conversation around how they will go about determining this, the operation itself. But again, this particular lesson, the objective itself was originally designed within a context. So because the objective carried a context, the whole lesson was able to carry a context. And that happens. So what we want to look at quickly is how we now can, as teachers, develop lessons around this thinking. Now, to develop lessons around this thinking, you have to start with objective in mind. Now, there are two sets of objectives you have to think about. The objectives that carry a natural context and those that don't. The lesson that I showed you was one in which the objective carried a natural context. And because it did, it allowed the entire lesson to carry that context. There are sprinkled throughout your curriculum document objectives that carry context. Here are a few examples, and I want you to help me to identify the context given. So grade 4, Algebra Term 2, Unit 4. The objective states, write 1 or 2-step problems based on information given in a story, then write the correct algebraic sentence and solve the problem. I want you, colleagues, to just put in the chat the key word or words that allude to the context of the objective. Again, some objectives carry context, some don't. But we want to see if we can identify the context given in the objective. So you can just place in the chat the words or word that gives you the key context for the objective, right? And while I do wait and anticipate your responses, the word story becomes that critical word. We hear the word story, so there's some story that is being told. If we go at it again, you're going to find here grade 5, Geometry Term 1, Unit 3. The objective states, differentiate between models of parallel and perpendicular line segments when drawn or seen in the environment. Again, what becomes the natural context for the objective? The objective is given to us from the curriculum, word for word, but it carries a natural context. It means that the lesson must be guided by the context of the objective given. And if you, wherever you are, you picked up that it's the environment that represents the context, you're correct. So it is not enough to draw lines on the book. You have to now bring them to an opportunity where they can identify said lines in the environment. So if you design the lesson around the second objective here for grade 5, you're going to find that when you go through the idea of exploring parallel lines, exploring perpendicular lines and what makes them perpendicular, what makes them parallel, the application part of it comes in now, especially in your elaboration, when you ask the students to identify these parallel or perpendicular features in the environment, in the classroom, outside the classroom, somewhere in the environment. That's the context that you are giving to the student. Another example taken now from grade 6, Measurement Term 2, Unit 2. And this one states to investigate and use the formula for the volume of a rectangular prism to solve problems. And it's basically saying to us right there in the final line to solve problems. You're not, the objective is not saying to you, go and find the volume of a solid. It is saying to you, you are given a contextualized situation and you should utilize volume in the context. The objectives will beg of you to do certain things. What I'm trying to do today, though, in initiating this phase of conceptualizing lessons, is taking note of when objectives are asking you to contextualize. When the objectives ask you to contextualize, you ought to then make deliberate attempts to ensure that there is a real-life component, either in story form or in experience, where the learner gets a chance to apply the concept to a real-life situation. And the best place to do this would be in elaborate, but there are other opportunities where you can do it based on how you decide to design your lesson plan. But at the very least, if there is nowhere else to put it, the elaborate is the place to go. Now, there are times, like I said earlier, where the objectives don't carry a context. Some objectives are very abstract in nature. When this happens, it is a prime opportunity for you to contextualize the objective. So you need to then think about, where can I place this objective? What situation can I place the objective in so that it can be made real and relevant to the students? And quite often you may hear students say to you, that, boy, especially the older ones, why do I need to learn this? Why do I need to learn this math concept? And the unanswered question can be quite discomforting for many. So providing them with an opportunity where they see firsthand the use of the content or the concept will eliminate the need to even ask the question in the first place. But I want to show you an objective void of context, and I want to give you an opportunity to just share with me in the chat. I do crave your participation. Just what situation could you place this objective in so that it is contextualized? So let me start very simple. Here's a grade 6 objective taken from term 3, unit 2. It's a measurement strand, and it says to calculate any one of the measures of distance, time, or rate of travel given the measures of the other two. And I want you to think about it carefully. There is a natural alignment. It's not stated as a context. There's no context stated really, but there is a natural alignment for this objective somewhere. I do hope that someone will say to me in the chat, this is how I would infuse it by the saying, even one word. What one word could you use or phrase to say, this is the setting I would put this lesson in for it to make sense to the students? Because think about it, teachers. To teach this lesson where you have distance, time, and rate, or distance, time, and speed, and all you're doing is, here's my formula, here are two of them, calculate the next one. So I say, all right, speed is distance divided by time. That's what speed is, basically. And you come and you say, speed, they say distance is 10 kilometers, time is 2 hours. And they divide the 10 kilometers by the 2 hours and they get 5 kilometers per hour. And that's it. You just find the speed. There is a natural opportunity here where you go beyond just dividing two numbers to get the speed, but actually create a story, even if they can't read, to tell them a story. If you're going to drive, if you're on your bicycle or you're in a car and you're driving 10 kilometers on the road and you get there in 2 hours, how fast were you driving? You know, you make a story out of it where the content becomes meaningful. So if you thought about the idea of driving, or you thought about the idea of cycling, even walking too, it provides a context where as you build out the lesson, at the very least, again, by the time you get to elaborate, hopefully even before that, but at the very least, by the time you get to elaborate, you want to at least be able to have the students not just abstractly working out speed, distance, and time, but having it in a context where the context becomes so relevant that they need not ask you why I need to learn this. Because it means that they could use that knowledge in their real world setting. For example, when I'm driving into Kingston, I can look at the speed that I'm driving and look at the distance and have a rough idea as to how long it will take me to get there on a good where there's no traffic or bad conditions. But again, you have to start off by where the objective doesn't carry a context. Can I find something and align it to it? That's the first step in actually building out the lesson. One more example for you. Grade 5, number, term 2, unit 1. This very abstract objective says, place in serial order any set of decimal numbers, decimal fractions, right? So you're just going to now take 0.21 and 0.53 and put them in order, ascending or descending order. And that's the essence of what the objective wants you to do. But the question is still being asked. Is there an opportunity to take on this objective and make it relevant that when the students are going through the lesson, it makes sense to learn this today? Because that's the thing, you want the students to feel like what I'm doing right now seems very essential and beneficial to me. And you want to go the route of show me, not tell me, where instead of having just saying to them, this is going to be good for you someday, provide the opportunity right now where this content becomes relevant. So I hope you thought about something, and there may not be a willingness to share it in the chat, but I'm going to actually recommend 2 things you could align to it, and hopefully your thoughts would have been somewhere around these responses as well. But there's an opportunity here Because as Jamaicans, we take on track and field. Our members in the Caribbean, track and field is a big thing for us. And when it comes on to racing, we go down to the millisecond. We go into the decimals. So track and field is an opportunity to serialize decimal fractions, where you can look at first, second, third. The whole ascending and descending order becomes quite relevant when you juxtapose it in a setting of track and field, where those persons with the lower number wins the race. So if you did a race and you're clocking, you both have 9 seconds as your whole number. What is going to make first differentiated from second is the milliseconds, the decimal, the 10th place and the 100th place. So there is an opportunity there. Another opportunity where this becomes quite essential is in terms of dollars and cents. I know in Jamaica, dollars and cents is not really a prominent feature of our local setting. But when we think about other currencies, the US dollar and others, dollars and cents is still quite relevant. So this is an opportunity to not just serialize, again, decimal fractions by looking at descending and ascending order, but you're now saying, look, who has more money? Who you want to, so you're actually creating a context, a setting where the content becomes relevant. And what we want out of this now is that for the students, they get exposed very early to such a structure, and such a structure allows them now to comfortably fit themselves into the real world setting, as well as when it's time to take on the performance tasks for grades 4, 5, 6, whichever grade it is, they can pull on the content aligned to the context, because they have been, from the start of the term, been exposed continually to contextualized settings, where every content they are being taught is being mapped back to something in real life. And they say, oh, you know, I've done this in real, I've done this before. I've been exposed to this before. And because I'm exposed to it, I can now take on the task when given. So we want to bear those things in mind. Now, another element that I have to talk on, and I'm pretty much closing out at this point in time, but another element that we have to talk about is the openness of the task. When we talk about an open task, we want a task where there are many entry points and many solution opportunities. You want to develop a task where it's not about going straight to an answer, but you provide some room where the child can make a decision within the constraints and still achieve a response that is acceptable. So the elaboration is the elaborate phase of the 5E process is a wonderful opportunity to provide an open task. You don't want to, those closed tasks, you can reserve them for the evaluate, the last activity where you do in the lesson. But right there in the elaborate, you want to ensure that whatever you're doing, don't make it closed. Have it be an open task for the student. So let's say we have here on screen, grade 4, measurement term 2, unit 2. And there's an objective here that says demonstrate an understanding of the difference between units of length and units of area. So basically what we're saying is the student must be able to show you that they know the difference between area and length. And the biggest disparity that we have around area and length comes in when we ask them to find perimeter and area. So that's really where it is. So you want to provide students an opportunity now that they can find the area and find the perimeter and be able to differentiate between the two. But if you're going to do an elaborate activity, you want to ensure that it's so open that they can handle it. So you say, all right, I need to provide them an opportunity for them to create their own shapes. Grade 4 mainly counts squares. So because you're counting squares, you want a grid. Now on this grid, you want something that will cause them to create an area as well as to create a perimeter based on a shape that they have to pull forward. So let me think of something quickly. And let us say that we have this grid representing a plot of land. And we say that each square in the grid is 1 square meter. That's the premise. This time, the task is given to them that you have sheep on the farm, and based on where the sheep are standing, based on where they're standing, you need to draw a perimeter fence around them. So you are free to make the perimeter as large or small as you want, but ensure that when you finish drawing it, the sheep, they're all within the boundaries of the fence drawn. And I mean, you could think of the endless possibilities that would come as a result of this task. Because you may have students who will come up front and say right away, all right, I'm going to draw a rectangle. It's going to go around everybody. And when they go around like this, they've drawn it. You ask them up front now, what is the area of this pen that you drew? And what is the perimeter of the pen? And you could even go as far as to talk about the material, the length of material needed to make this fence. And I'm sure when they do this drawing now, each person may have a little variation. They go and they count. So they either count the individual squares or they count how many rows of 5 or columns of 4 they have, and they'll get the area. But then comparatively, they will go ahead and count the length of the sides all around, and they get the perimeter. Their ability to give you the area and the perimeter correctly is an indication that they're able to demonstrate understanding in the difference of the two, length and area. But you did not give them a closed activity to do. You gave them room to wiggle. So let us say you have a very creative, a very openly expressive child in your class who doesn't think within the box. It's always thinking outside the box. This child may want to minimize the space given. So this child may want to cut corners and pull back a bit. And in pulling back, the area here now is much smaller. But then having gone through the perimeter, they may very well find that the perimeter of this one and the previous one will be pretty much the same. But it allows them to realize that there is indeed a difference between perimeter and area. And the two have their own properties. But that's the whole idea of this particular activity. Now, again, colleagues, I did say to you that I'm not going to stay long, but I want to ensure that I open the mind towards what it is that we want to achieve. And don't leave me yet. I have a few more things I want to share with you, upcoming activities. But let us summarize on the matter. Now, mathematics education is indeed very important. We know that to function in the world that we live in, we need to have certain skills in place, both quantitative and analytical skills, along with the ability to communicate those quantities, think critically, and solve problems. In the teaching arena, the 5E model is a wonderful tool to allow for consistent application of content. Every single lesson can have it if the E's are followed where the elaboration is capitalized on. It's a perfect alignment for application, even though the lesson can have application in other places, be engage, explore, and evaluate. But at the very least, it is designed, it is woven into the 5E that application can take place right there in the elaborate stage of the E. With that done, you allow your lesson to be contextualized, not at the end of the school year or before an exam, but it is consistently allowing students to be exposed to content in a conceptualized manner. In doing so, what that allows now is exposure. So when students come across the task, for example, the performance task, the exposure to seeing their math content within a context doesn't throw them off and they can handle the question. You can't do what you're not exposed to. If you're not exposed continually to contextualized teaching, there is a lessened chance that you would do well in an exam where it's mainly about a context. At the same time, too, as you seek to build out conceptual lessons that speak to contextualization, you want to ensure that at the very least, again, your elaborate stage of the E talks about an open task, a task where students have the openness to take on the task, have open multiple opportunities to enter, as well as multiple solution points. At this point in time, colleagues, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here with me today. If you have any comments or questions, we can take them at this point in time, right? And while I even wait on a hand or two to go up for questions or even comments in the chat, I'm going to just share some other things with you in the meantime. So while I wait on you to say, in my pursuit of improving myself as an educator, I did come across a statement, a TED Talk I watched with Michael Stevens. And he said that the trick to education is to teach in such a way that people only find out that they're learning when it's too late. And the premise behind his statement was that you want students to enjoy what they're doing in the learning arena, that by the time they have learned, they would have just then realized that they're being taught something new. The question regarding the recording is now on YouTube. What I will do, I'll send the YouTube link out to all members who register for the session so that you can go back and rewatch at any given time. At the same time, too, colleagues, I do want to get your feedback on today's session. I'm going to post a link in the chat right now. And this link is allow you to evaluate the session so that your feedback can be used to guide how we further engage you. I'll place in the chat the link to that evaluation form. At the same time, too, I want to use this opportunity to market or at least to share with you upcoming virtual sessions we have for students. We have 2 sets of sessions coming up for grade 5 and for 4. May 31st and June 1, we'll have our grade 5 performance task session focusing on conceptualized content. And what we intend to do, we will be sharing with the schools our performance activity that you can do. We'll send a link where persons can upload their responses there as well as a PDF or as a picture. And then on the day of the event, we will go through it in a conceptual manner, ensuring that we explore tips and little things that you can do to take on such tasks. So please save the date and utilize the opportunity with your students. The sessions will start at 4 p.m. Daily once we have them. For grade 5, it's the 31st of May, 1st of June, 14th of June, and 15th of June for grade 4, again, starting at 4 o'clock. I want to also remind you that we have our teacher resource kit. It's a Google Drive folder with a series of videos, lesson plans, assessments, PowerPoint presentations that you can use. So all of our virtual sessions that we have been conducting, we have them in that folder. You can go and download our PowerPoints and use them as you see fit. All our resources are open, free of charge, and available for you to use when you see fit. So please do take advantage of the resources. I just placed the link in the chat. At the same time, too, we have diversified our reach. We have our social media pages. You can please go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube page where you can keep up to date with our content. It's purely educational content, again, free of cost, available for both students, sessions for parents, as well as sessions for teachers as well. We have our Facebook and social and our Instagram pages where you can follow us as we do update those pages to showcase what we have coming up and is stored for the system. So please take advantage of that as well. And if there be no other comment or no question at this point in time, colleagues, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here today. I did promise that I wasn't going to be long, but I do hope that you walked away with a different way of thinking about utilizing the 5E, the elaborate phase of the lesson, and how to contextualize the lesson. I must give credit to SlidesGo, as they have been providing me with wonderful PowerPoint templates. I recommend that if you want to do PowerPoints as well, you could utilize their templates. Most of them are free of cost, so you could utilize those so you could have very attractive and appealing presentation outlines. Thank you again, everyone, and I do hope that you benefited greatly from today's session. All the best to you. Please feel free to reach out to me if it is that you need any support in your school or any way that I can give assistance, but please do so by giving us enough time to respond and to prepare. Thanks once more and all the best. I will be closing out the session momentarily, but I do hope that you have retrieved the evaluation form link as well as the link to our resource kit. All the best, colleagues.